airport were they spies? They don't realize that the Japanese were there first. They took this old land that nobody else wanted and made it into good agricultural land. And then the farmers thought, oh, look at that. Then they wanted it, so then they started to agitate, saying those Japs. So you have to be careful about how people react to success, and you yourself too. You have to have an open mind on anything that happens and not be quick to judge other people.
Yes? I think there might be a... Okay, please go ahead.
How long were you in the camp?
How long was that? Well, I went to camp, Pearl Harbor was December 41, December 7th, and I went to camp in March of 42. And I stayed in Tanforan until October. And then the family was sent to Gila River, Arizona. And we stayed there a few years. My brother was working for the University of California doing a survey or a study on the evacuation. So we may have had things a little bit easier because he could talk to his professors in Berkeley and UC and complain about something, and maybe they could go to someone, straighten things out. But he eventually wrote a book about his experience. It was a diary, and it's called The Kikuchi Diary. This is the book. This was part of his study at the University of California. And, it's written just as a diary. And it's interesting because he was not raised the same. He was not raised with our family. He was away in an orphan home for a number of years due to our family situation. And so it's interesting to read his thoughts and ideas, even to me, because his association with the whole family was quite different. It was the first time he was subjected to a family life. But his book is very interesting, and I believe it's still available in the stores. It's called The Kikuchi Diary.
So there was another question?
Yeah. How after you were released from the camps, how often or how differently were you treated? Like,
How often what?
how often were you treated differently?
So after the war, when you left the camps, was the treatment better, or the treatment?
Well, it's interesting because when I left Gila River, Arizona, I went to Chicago, and I can say that there was no prejudice, no feeling. People didn't say, what camp? What are you talking about? They were quite unaware, and in New York too, a lot of people didn't know what happened. 120,000 people were put behind barbed wires, and they didn't know about it. I mean, you know, something's wrong. But much later, after I left camp, I went to Poland, and I visited the Dachau prison camp. And I was quite interested to find that it was very similar to many things, except for one thing: we did not have the gas chamber. For that, we could be thankful, I guess. But the setup was similar. We had food lines and everything. And and then it was ironic because you'll be hearing about the 442nd soldiers later on. They were the first to liberate the prison, the Dachau prison. But the higher up said, you can't go in right away. Said, wait till tomorrow. So tomorrow came, and the rest of the American soldiers, the white soldiers, came, and they let them go in first to say, we are the liberators. And the 442nd had to go in after that. They didn't want to give them the credit. You think that's fair? And then the Japanese, the 442nd boy said, it was amazing. Here we are, we're liberating people in a prison camp when our own families are in camp in the United States. I mean, there's something ironic there, you know. But if you'd like to hear something about the 442nd too, I guess most of you Ace was a very young recruit, and he could probably tell you a few things about it that you'd like to hear.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. My wife Alice's life was a little different than mine since I was from the Northwest. 1942, when they moved us off from our homes, I was pretty much the same age as you people. I was 17 years old. I was the junior at Washington High School in Portland. Because we were moved in May of 42 into what they call assembly centers before the permanent camp that I went to in Idaho. We never finished my junior year because we had to leave the high school. They sent us to the Civic Livestock Exposition, which is now Expo. Of course, the Expo building today is much more modern than the building that we were in. It was just an overgrown barn. They laid down wooden planks as flooring over the dirt, put up plywood walls with a curtain, and I was the middle son. My mother and father had 5 boys. I was the third. We were all born in Portland. My mother and father came from Japan. My mother came in 1917. My father came in 1909. They married here in Vancouver in 1919 through, I think, through a marriage counselor, because they didn't know each other. Anyhow, we were in the exposition building from May until August of 1942 before they took us to a permanent camp in Minidoka, Idaho, which was north of Twin Falls, I believe. North or south, I'm not sure. It was sagebrush country, desert. And the only people around there were the sheep herders. And I was there and graduated high school in 1943.
Stop for us.
It was the first graduating class of high school in 1943. There were some questions about my service. When the war broke out, a few people that older UK people that were part of the draft, they were not calling the Japanese into the service. They held them in abeyance. They put them in a 4F classification. I was too young because the registration was 18 years old. But in 1943, they decided to form a Japanese unit and open up the draft. So they sought volunteers. At that time, I was only 17. I couldn't volunteer, and my mother would not sign any papers for me to volunteer. Her main reason for this was, why should you volunteer for a country that interned you as a citizen? If they call you into service, you serve. But do not volunteer. But my older brother, who was 2 years older, secretly volunteered. And the way I found out he volunteered is, once you volunteered for the service, you could get daily passes outside of the camp.